Hey folks, today we're covering Dev Diary 184 The Silk Road. This is for All Under Heaven, the next DLC coming for Crusader Kings 3. In the first half of this Dev Diary, they're going to cover the Silk Road mechanics, how it's going to work, and then in the second half of this Dev Diary, they're going to cover the innovation screen and some improvements we're going to see once this DLC does release. So let's just get straight into it. As always, hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, but let's just get straight into it. So the Silk Road, the aim of this feature is to represent the movement of ideas and interconnectedness of the east and west of the world. The Silk Road touches on commerce thematically, but it isn't a trade system. Maybe we'll get that next year, who knows. Those certain trade routes were more or less prevalent at different times. The famed Silk Road was in fact a myriad of routes snaked across Asia, with the Hexi Corridor and the Tarim Basin amongst the most well-known of these. These routes carried goods, travelers, and innovations, and many different regions benefited from the flow indirectly. And then next they're going to show us a map of this situation, the Silk Road, and then the information panel you can see, and also the map mode as well. You can see that on the screen now, the 6 different regions, and then on the right-hand side you'll see a breakdown of each one of these regions, what's currently happening in that region. There are different bonuses they're going to talk about in a minute, and then also which innovations are there as well that you can pick up through some decisions and different mechanics as well. So as you can see on the screenshot as well, the Silk Road is split into 6 regions: China, Central Asia, Tibet, Transcaspia, India, and the Occident. Each of these regions has a phase, a hub that serves as its regional center. You can see those on the screen now, and an active Silk Road innovation. And they're going to explore each one of these features in the next part of the Dev Diary. So the first one they're going to talk about is the phases. Regions within the Silk Road situation fluctuate between 3 different phases: exceptional bounty, steady trading, and hardship. They're going to show us the tooltips for those in a second. As with the Great Step situation, the phase of each region within the Silk Road situation is tracked separately, with different passive effects for all participants and countries in the region determined by that phase. The active phase determines the benefits received by the participants in the situation, as well as passive modifiers which apply to the region as a whole. And again, they're going to go through those now. So the first one is steady trading, and the common effects for all participants in this situation is diplomatic range plus 10%, cultural fascination progress plus 2%, disease resistance minus 5, I guess as disease is traveling along the Silk Road, development growth 0.05, and then the Silk Road steady trading effect is plus 50% domain taxes. So some pretty good bonuses here. This is the steady trading modifier, so I guess the one that's probably going to be active the most often. So some nice bonuses for yourself and then also people that are within these regions as well. The next one they're going to show is the hardship phase. So common effects, development growth minus 0.02, Silk Road hardship effects, levy size minus 10%, development growth minus 30%. This one obviously very bad. The Silk Road's kind of falling apart, I guess, in this phase, and some bad things are going to happen. Very similar to how seasons work in the step though, these are specific to each region. So one region could be in this hardship mode, another region could be in the first one, and then the third phase we're going to see in a second as well. So this one obviously not the best for you. You're going to be losing development growth, but even if you stay in steady trading, you're going to have to be in this bad mode for quite a while to negate the bonuses you were getting previously. And then the third of these phases is exceptional bounty. You can see the common effects. This is for all participants. Diplomatic range plus 25%, development growth plus 10%, cultural fascination plus 5%, plague resistance minus 10, because I guess there's more artists, more travelers, more trading going on the Silk Road. So that's going to make disease that much easier to be spread along it. Development growth 0.10. And then the Silk Road exceptional bounty effects is 3 gold a month, 25% more domain tax, and then travel safety and speed plus 20% better as well. So some really nice bonuses there. The travel thing's kind of like an extra bonus, I guess. Does make other travel as well in the region that bit safer. So how do these phases change? As with some other situations, actions and events could trigger catalysts that push the situation towards one of these new phases. Unique to the Silk Road situation, however, is that these catalysts are applied to each region separately. One region could be having a boon, whilst the other one could be in that hardship mode as well. You can see the next screenshot, the Silk Road catalyst. You can see one of those there. The Byzantine Empire title is destroyed. That gives you 50 points towards this. Obviously one of the higher ones. And then the dynastic cycle is in the division situation phase. They're going to talk about that in a second as well. And these catalysts, they can be local or wider reaching. Because the Silk Road generally flowed westward, upstream events, particularly those in China, can impact regions downstream or further west from them. A local conflict may be damaging to one region, but the collapse of the ruling Chinese dynasty will be felt indirectly across the entirety of this system. The dynastic cycle is a key driver of prosperity along the Silk Road. As long as it remains in the stable phase, the prosperity of all regions will grow towards exceptional bounty, For this reason, the status of the cycle is always shown at the bottom of the Silk Road UI. In short, the benefits felt by those further westward depend on the stability of everything further east. So if China can stay stable for a long time, you will gradually see everything going westward, getting more and more stable, more and more prosperous, and that's going to be a really good time for you. But there is ways that it can turn obviously the other way. It's not going to stay in that mode forever. It is ultimately going to cycle round, kind of like how the dynastic cycle works, but you'll have this cycle on the trade route as well. The next thing they're going to show us is a picture of the map and how this is going to work. So you can see the routes of the Silk Road. They are those red little pathways there with the arrows. They're going to show where the route is going and where it's kind of heading off to in the future. These aren't just for show, however. Hostile acts such as raiding in these locations will affect the region's prosperity. This map mode will also show you the region's active innovation, as well as the progress towards the next movement in those phases that we just saw earlier. So yes, you can see those red arrows. If you do go and raid those, that actually affects the prosperity of that zone. So this is how I guess as another player, you could come in and cause problems for it. Especially if you're a nomad, you could head south and really wreck a bunch of these if you do a lot of raiding. And that's going to make sure the realms around you in the Silk Road don't pick up the good benefits. So you can counteract this system. It isn't totally like isolated from everything outside of it. You can come in and cause problems as well. I wonder if warfare also affects it. I guess it does. As they mention raiding, I imagine if you're sieging these places down as well in warfare, it must affect it as well. I would think so anyway. And then through this dev diary so far, they've mentioned innovations and they're going to cover some specific ones you'll get in this system. So Silk Road innovations. These are a new set of innovations that exist alongside the existing base set that we already have. Each represents a different technology that was discovered in China before anywhere else in the world and was spread to other cultures, usually via the Silk Road. And you can see that on the next screenshot here. Fire medicine, yes, it's basically gunpowder. And this may only be acquired as a potential cultural fascination via the Chinese heritage, a tradition as well, or the Silk Road, as they just said. You can recruit fire lancers as men-at-arms. They're going to be awesome by the sounds of it. And then it also unlocks gunpowder manufacturer line of buildings, and I imagine they're going to be pretty good as well. And this is going to be a set of innovations, as they said, that you can generally either have in China already or around that area, or you've got to bring them along the Silk Road, and they're going to cover how that works in a second as well. So although there are 6 regions in the Silk Road, only 4 innovations are active at any time. China holds 1, Tibet shares 1 with Central Asia, India shares 1 with Transcaspia, and Europe holds 1 as well. Every 12 years, each region passes its active innovation 1 step downstream. China then adopts a new Silk Road innovation at random from the pool of valid innovations. As the Han culture unlocks more Silk Road innovations, these are then added to the pool that can be selected by China. Cultures can gain access to these innovations by either having Chinese heritage, have a ruler of that culture hold a hub while the innovation is active in that region, having the Sinophilic tradition, or using the Visit Silk Road Bazaar decision whilst visiting a hub. They're going to talk about visiting those in a minute. Chinese and Sinophilic cultures also have access to Han's known Silk Road innovations without needing to participate in the Silk Road directly. That's all well and good, but what is a hub and how do you visit one? They have been talking about these during this dev diary so far. So hub buildings. Each region has a single hub special building that is in a fixed location that represents the key regional center of trade, such as the Karom in Tibet or the Bazaar in India. These hubs provide income and phase-based regional benefits and can be upgraded to a second tier to grant additional benefits to the holder. Building or upgrading a hub also triggers a catalyst that can push the region towards greater prosperity, so it interacts with all those previous systems we've already talked about. So you can see one of them here. This is a marketplace. Holding taxes plus 10%, development growth 0.10, and then the holder of this holding, monthly prestige plus 5%, monthly renown plus 5%, and travel speed plus 5% as well. So if you have this and the very bountiful phase, you've got 25% more travel speed. That's going to help you with a bunch of interactions as well. But you can see all added together, it's going to be a very prosperous place to play in. You're going to have a bunch of money, a bunch of development, all these innovations as well, potentially. But again, you're going to have other forces like the nomads coming down and trying to cause problems for you as well. So hubs serve as a source of innovations to their holders' cultures, as well as a destination for a new decision. Visit a Silk Road market. You can see that on the screen at the moment. Some very nice art as well on display here. You can see the description and then a valid option, so you can pick a different one of these. I'm kind of surprised this is a decision and not just an activity. I'm not sure why it's differentiated from the other one. I guess because you have to kind of make the decision to go. I'm not 100% sure. I don't understand why it's not just an activity. But anyway, that is how it's going to work. And then every 10 years, this decision allows you to spend gold to travel to a hub where a Silk Road innovation is active. By passing a learning and stewardship skill check, you can bring this innovation back and add it to your culture's pool of possible innovations to research in the future. So this is really cool. You can visit one of these hubs and then potentially bring back one of these innovations. And as it says here, you don't immediately get it. You just add it to your pool of them, and then you can research it later on as well. And there's some changes as to how that's going to work they're going to talk about in the second half of this dev diary. I can see why they've changed the innovation system a little bit. It's nothing too crazy, but I do like the changes we're going to talk about later. And you can see an example of this here. They've gone to visit this location, and you can see the different effects here. If you do roll the dice well, you can bring up one of these Silk Road innovations and it will become available for your culture. And then also, as they are a trading area, you can roll the dice and get some gold instead. So if you're not interested in the innovation that's active there, maybe you've got it already, or you're just not that interested, you can potentially get an artifact or some gold instead. So again, some different ways this can play out depending on what you're trying to do. But with that, that's going to be our initial look at how the Silk Road's going to work. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. I think this is a pretty fun way for it to play out. I have recently been saying that I thought we'd get a very basic Silk Road, and then when we get Trade and Merchant Republics added to the game, we get like the proper version of the Silk Road. But it looks like that is what we're getting in this DLC. It looks like we're getting this fleshed out version, all these different phases, working a little bit like the seasons in the steppe, and then these different ways it interacts with like innovations, gold, artifacts, traveling, development, all these different ways. And I think it is going to show how all those things travel from China to Europe. Some things obviously travel the other way as well, but it is really about bringing those Chinese innovations especially over to the rest of the map, and you have a way to do that. You haven't got to go and hybridize with Chinese somehow and then bring them back with you. You can do it through this system. I think this looks really cool. We'll see how it plays once we get our hand on the game. The other part of the dev diary, as I said earlier, is the innovations rework. Now, I will say here, I didn't choose the text on how this looks, so I do apologize. They had a bit of a joke on the forums that they intentionally chose a silly font, so here you go. It is how it looks on the forums. So this is one of the developers coming to the forums and showing us how this system has been improved and making it a lot more player-friendly, I think, as well. So I'm going to put the two versions side to side in the video here, so you can see the current one on the left-hand side, the Italian culture. We've all seen how this works. You've got the military civic and other innovations there, and then you've got the time frame across the top where you have to finish a certain amount to move into the next era. But you can see it all laid out there. This is what we currently have. And then the current culture head at the bottom. Hey, look, they picked everyone's favorite character. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the Italian culture in the new system. And again, you can see those eras along the top, but they've changed how the rest of it's laid out. So you can see the current fascination on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, you can see cultural spread. That's the new wording for exposure. They've renamed it to make it a little bit more relevant to this system. I will agree with that. I think this makes more sense. It is the spread of innovations from different cultures into yours. So I think that is better than exposure. I think exposure, generally people think of like weather features and less so something like this. So I do like the change there. And then below that, yes, you've probably noticed already, the innovations are set up a little bit differently. Now, they are the same innovations and they are still under the same different things. So these are all the civic ones in this example. But as you can see, they're slightly different colored. And why is that? Well, the biggest change to innovations in this update is that they are now associated to specific skills. If you have high diplomacy skill, you will discover diplomacy innovations faster if they are set as your fascination. So it doesn't affect all of them. It only affects the fascination that you choose. And I think that does make sense. And also makes this a little bit more interactive. I don't know if you're like me. I generally pick the exposure, or I guess the cultural spread one, and then just match it with my fascination so I can blast through it even quicker. With this update, I guess as each character, you might go into it and actually change it to something else. So if you have a very high diplomacy character, you will pick those diplomacy focused ones. If you have high stewardship, maybe you're going to go for communal government, something along those lines. I would imagine the bonuses you pick up for matching your lifestyle to the innovations of the same type is pretty good. Otherwise, you'll probably just leave it as any of them that you're actually after. But this could bring some actual interest into this system. You're not just going to click and forget it. You're actually going to go into it with a new ruler and think, okay, I need to go to my innovations that I want to boost through a lot with a character that matches that innovation as well. We'll see how it actually plays out. But I think this will make this a little bit more interesting. Sure, most players are probably just going to beeline for the important ones that they're after. But especially for a player like myself, I'm probably going to try and match them to what my character is good at. And hopefully the bonuses kind of lean into that a little bit more as well. So that is the major change around these innovations. But there are some other changes as well. They've also made it possible to discover innovations outside of the era you're actually in, which isn't currently possible. Although progress in these is obviously very, very slow. even if you try focus on them, it isn't going to be that fast. You can see that in the next screenshot. Italian innovations by era. Again, they've got the fascination, the cultural spread, and then you can see they're not currently in this era. So if you go down to Castle Bailey's, they are trying to learn this, but 317 years left. It's going to be very difficult to do this. It's pretty much impossible to actually do this without actually just catching this up anyway through the innovations of the era that you're currently in. Get into this era, and then you're going to be receiving it a lot faster. You can see the tooltip here on how it is changed. So base progress is 0.3. Average development of Italian counties, it doesn't say, it's kind of blocked behind that sign. What does that sign mean, guys? It means this isn't finished yet. The numbers you see here will get balanced in the future, potentially. Everything we see in these dev diaries is work in progress. With that out of the way, because this innovation is from an era that you're not currently in, you can see minus 0.43 modifier, which pretty much negates all the other modifiers you've got. That is why this is progressing very, very slowly. You can see a 24% chance to gain 0.1 progress each month. So you're not going to be able to use this to boost yourself to primogenitor or something. I guess they've implemented this system because through the Silk Road, you would be able to get innovations that you don't currently have. So I guess as that's going to happen, they've thought, why not go in and update this? I guess you might be able to get innovations through some other method as well in the future. But then these future ones that you're very far away from, they do unlock, but they're very hard to actually research and pick up. So you're not going to be able to beeline these that easily if that is something you're worried about. And then the last thing they're going to talk about is what they discussed earlier, traveling along these routes and picking up those innovations. So as you can see on the map here, this is somebody traveling to try and get the new gunpowder unit. The first step is going to be using that visit a Silk Road market decision that they talked about earlier. Once they've taken the decision, you can actually travel to that location. Again, you can see that on the map at the moment. Very risky in this example, although they don't have a caravan master or any of those two bonuses either. But again, it is very far to travel, so it is going to be pretty risky. Although I guess you don't have to travel all the way to the end to pick one of these up, but maybe it is the one they're after. As they said, this is gunpowder in this example, so that's when you're probably going to have to go all the way to China for. It is risky, but then if you are successful, you can see in the next screenshot, yes, they managed to make it there. You can see a new learning innovation, the fire medicine that we saw earlier, and that is 304 years left to research. A very long time. Again, you're not going to be able to beeline this immediately and pick it up, but you can get it and then slowly work towards it. I wonder if you then travel there again, do you get like an extra boost towards it? That would be pretty cool. You could keep traveling there to get it, but I guess the more degenerate of you folks would then keep doing it and then just keep farming that gunpowder and then be able to build those units. So maybe you can't do that. That would probably be a little bit overpowered. So anyway, you can see that. That is how that's going to work. And with that, guys, that's the end of the dev diary this week. Let me know what you think about it. I think the Silk Road side of things looks really cool. How that's going to play out, as I said before, it looks relatively fleshed out. I don't think we'll actually get a rework of this in the future. I think this is how it's going to work, and I quite like how it looks. Again, kind of similar to what I talked about a couple of years ago about how I wanted trade routes to work, and maybe this is our first hint towards it as well. As we know, some things that come in one DLC reappear in a later DLC as something else. Imagine that route that we just saw going to China. If you could do that for trade routes and you travel there, you travel to a different ruler, maybe you're Venice and you travel all the way up to London, doing one of these options, and then you get to see the king and you say to the king, hey, can I set up a trade route here? Can I set up a port here maybe? And then you travel back, and that could be how the mechanics work once we do get merchant republics or something like that. Maybe this is our first hint as to how that could work in the future. And then obviously the innovation change, not a massive change to be honest, but I do like how this makes some more elements of the game kind of interact with each other that little bit more. Your lifestyle affecting your innovations. I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, how often did the king or queen or whatever really affect how a culture learned things? But I think game-wise, having these systems interact with each other just makes the whole game that little bit more interesting, that little bit more intertwined together. So things you do in one system affect another system as well. And if you've enjoyed today's video, do hit the like button down below and do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I cover all the news around Crusader Kings 3. It seems like maybe we're getting a bit of a build-up to All Under Heaven. Maybe we'll get a release date at some point. It is supposed to be the last quarter of this year. We haven't got that long to go, so I guess we might get a release date at some point. Maybe next week we'll get a release date. And I'm also currently covering EU5 in a very similar manner, so if you enjoy my videos, if you're interested in the next era of history and how that game is going to play out, how the systems work in that game, do subscribe to the channel. I've got a playlist showing all the dev diaries for EU5, as well as Crusader Kings. So if you like Paradox games, basically, subscribe to the channel. A bunch of things coming in the future. I also live stream every Tuesday and Friday. We do campaigns, achievements, so we just talk about gaming, Paradox games, all those fun things. So do drop by if you haven't previously. But with that, we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you all next time.